Hey guys, quick heads up before I start the video. The link down below takes you to my Patreon, where you can download the project files for this video. Also gain access to my premium tutorials and in-depth courses where we build games together from start to finish. Check out my Patreon below, gain direct access to years of experience so that you can start working on your dream game tomorrow. Hello everybody and welcome back to a new episode of my multiplayer Bean Battle Royale tutorial series. So in the last episode we finished working on the actual spawning of the loot. So if the client, for example, here now walks up to a loot crate, presses E, then the loot crate will spawn some random loot based on a drop rate, so actually based on chances that we defined in a data table. And then we also set up these actual pickup items themselves, so we can now take a look at the health pack and then at the pistol and properly see them. And then the server here as well can just open a loot crate, see an item. So this one apparently only spawned a health pack right now. And then let's try it once more over here. And there we go. So now we got 2 AKs and a health pack. Both the server and the client see them all exactly in the same location. And these actors are rotating, which makes them look more interactive and more fun. And they also have actual physics. So if they would be on a slope, so let's say that they would be spawned on a slope like that, then they will actually be sliding down. Or let's say like Fortnite, that you build some kind of a fort and that fort collapses, then these actors will still actually respond to the changes happening in the world and basically fall down. So what are we going to work on in this episode? In this episode, we're going to make sure that when we look at it, we see that we can press E to interact. But in this episode, we're actually going to make it so that we can actually interact and pick up these items. So when you look at the AK here, for example, you need to be able to press E, and then you need to be able to get that in, let's say, slot 1. And then when the same player here looks at the pistol, they, for example, need to be able to pick up that pistol in slot 2. So let's say that we give the player 2 slots like that, and that's kind of the logic that we want to set up in this video. And then in the case that you would let's say that you have an AK in slot 1 and the pistol in slot 2, and you have slot 2 active, so you currently have the pistol in your hand, then what we want is that AK would be on your back at that point. And then let's say that with the pistol in your hand, you would run out of pistol ammo, and then you open another loot crate on the map, and then you want to pick up an assault rifle. Then what should happen is that the pistol should swap out with the assault rifle. The pistol should then basically fall on the floor and the assault rifle should then be put into your active slot. So slot 2 in this example. All right, let's go ahead and get started on that. Okay, so to get this all started, we're going to head over here to our core character. And then we're basically going to set it up all over here. So we head into our viewport. Then what is it that we want to achieve? Well, basically we want to attach a gun here on the right side of the character, or any tool that the character is holding in this case. And then the inactive item that the character is not holding, we basically want to put that on the back of the character. So what we're going to do is that the one on the right needs to be an actual blueprint, because that can be either a gun or a health pack or some other type of tool. So that will basically be interactive and have functionality. But the one on the back here is just for display and is just displaying whatever you have in your non-active slot, basically. So first of all, let's make the little backslot here. So we just click on plus and do a static mesh. We're going to call it SM backslot. And this one, we're just going to put it in the correct location. So something like this. And then for preview, we can get our little assault rifle here. Then we can see what that looks like. So we can basically adjust the transform on this a little bit. So we'll rotate it. And then we put it somehow that we like it. So let's say somewhere like this. So there we go. So that kind of looks cool. Then let's see what that looks like with our pistol. So if we find our little pistol here, then there we go. Yeah, okay, so that's great for this. So for now, let's basically put that to some kind of an assault rifle. And then here on the side, we basically want to have our actual actor, like I said. So with the capsule selected, we're then going to click here and type in child actor. Then we get a child actor. And then we're going to rename this to active, let's say weapon. So active weapon. Okay. And then let's say that we want to attach this actually to our mesh, because our mesh can be bending here in a little bit. And then let's say that we want to attach it to some kind of a bone. So over here we see parent socket, and then let's do spine 2. Well, typically if you don't have a bean character but a humanoid character, you would obviously attach this inside of, so you would attach your blueprint for your gun inside of your right hand or your left hand, for example. So then we can put this to the side here. and there we go. So now it's attached to spine 2, and then we can put some kind of a blueprint in here. So to show what that looks like, we're going to go over to our actors folder, and we're going to create ourselves our core weapon basically. So here we have actor, and then we're going to type BP underscore, and let's call it core weapon. Then if we open this guy up, make it bigger, then yet again we want to set up a weapon also dynamically. So you're picking up an ID as we saw in the last video. So here we have the pickup item. The pickup item has an ID, and then the pickup item sets itself up based on our pickup item data table, which we have over here, with the correct static mesh, the correct name, etc, etc. So what we want to do here yet again is that we want to have this core weapon class also initializing with something like an ID. So what I'm simply going to do here is that I'm going to copy paste all of this logic that we have inside of our setup item function here, and we're just going to go here to our weapon, and then we're going to paste it in and hook it up to the begin play. So here we go. Then we're going to right click the variable and click promote variable, hit compile and save. And then we see that the static mesh requires a target. So we're going to click on add here, type in static mesh. And then this static mesh, we're going to drag it here and plug it in, and then hit compile and save. Now we also might want this stuff to happen in the construction script so that yet again we can actually display it properly whenever we just hit compile inside of the editor as well. So that's easier for building for us. So we're going to select all of this logic, then we're going to right click, click function, and then we're going to call this setup. So there we go. Then we hit compile and save, open up that little function, make this a bit nicer. Head over to your construction script. If you don't have it, if it's gone somehow, can double click it here, and then we're going to drag in our setup function over here. Now make sure that your item has a default value that is available inside of your data table. So for me that's going to be 1 for the assault rifle here. So I'm going to set it to 1, hit compile, save. And then right now we can basically see that we have an assault rifle here. So then right now with the weapon over here, then we're going to select the static mesh, go to the collision, make sure that it has no collision, hit compile, save. Then we can go back over to our character to see what that looks like. So now we see that we have a giant gun, and the reason being is that, well, for my bones here, so on our engine, when it comes to like a skeletal mesh here, then that might mess up your skill every now and then, and that's basically what's occurring here. So I'm just going to click here on skill with the active tool selected, put this to 0.01 to make it back to true size. So basically, since we attach it to the spine, then the whole skill becomes messed up. Basically, it becomes way bigger than it is supposed to be because of a Blender to Unreal scaling thing. But then here we now see the gun attached to it. Now we're also going to select the back gun and make sure that this one also has no collision. There we go. Then we see that our gun is pointing down. So with the active weapon selected here, we're going to click rotate it 90 degrees. And there we go. So that's kind of what it would look like in our game. So now we go ahead here and hit play. Then this is what it would look like. But now what we see is that it basically does not respond to us looking up and down. And that is because, well, typically if you don't work with a bean, you would have animation offset animations, or what those are called. And that makes sure that your character can look up and down. So we're going to actually set up animation offset so that we can also have our gun bending with wherever the character looks, and the character itself also actually bending. So before we go any further into setting up this weapon, let's go ahead and set up that AO for our characters, that looks a bit better. So if we take a look here inside of our assets folder, then we go to character, and then we have anims, and then we see that we already have a couple of animation offset anims in here. So basically, since this is of course a multiplayer tutorial, mainly focused on how to set up a multiplayer battle royale and how to handle the multiplayer aspect of it, I do recommend that if you have more questions about animation offset, that you simply check out the Unreal Engine documentation or any specific tutorials out there that cover animation offset. But to quickly show you guys, these animations are made in Blender. All of the actual offset animations are simply one frame, so you see that they're extremely short, and then you just export them in a couple of poses. So this one basically looks down, this one looks to the forward, so center, this one looks up, and then we also need a base animation that is just idle, that's basically just looking forward. So for the base animation, you could also duplicate your forward animation. Then what you do in each of these animations is that you go down to the settings here, and then the additive, you basically have to set it to mesh space. then the base pose here, you need to set it to selected animation frame. And then for the base pose animation, you in each of them, so in each tree, so the downward, forward, and the up animation, you basically need to set the base pose as the forward AO animation. So if you do that, then also here, we'll see the same setup, mesh base, selected animation frame, forward. And this one, which is up, is also mesh base, selected animation frame and forward. And then what you do is that you right click, go to animations, and then you create yourself an aim offset 1D, so one directional in this case. Then we open that guy up. And then over here, we simply set up the horizontal axis to have pitch. So we have minus 90 degrees, 90 degrees, grid division of 2, snapping to the grid. Then all the way here on the left, we see our down animation, our forward animation in the middle, and here on the right at 90 degrees is our up animation. And then for the preview base pose, we need that basically that default animation. So this one is just the forward animation copy pasted, but then we have made no additions here to the mesh space and all of those settings. So this one is simply set to no additive. And then if we take a look in our AO, you can then hold Control and just go over the line, and then we can actually properly see the bean looking. So if we aim 90 degrees down, then this is the result. So our nose is in our belly a bit. And then if we look up, this is the result. And now we want our gun to basically go off of these directions as well. So that's what we're going to use. So how do we now set up the aim offset to work with the character? Well, for that, we are simply going to need to make a little animation blueprint. So we go here to animation, animation blueprint, select the skeleton for your characters, in this case our bean. Then we can call this animBP bean, open this guy up. That brings us to the animation graph, but we need to go to the event graph first. And then in here, we're basically, we're going to move this code down a little bit. So that's the default code. So what we're going to do here, we're going to right click and type in blueprint initialize animation. So this is the event that we want. And then what we're going to do is type get owning actor, which is the owning actor is basically whatever we attach this blueprint to. So whatever character here we set up with this animation blueprint is going to be our owning actor. And then we're simply going to cast to character. So we don't have to cast to a specific character. Since our character is basically derived from the character class, we simply want to cast to this one. And then we're going to store this reference here as a variable. So we're just going to promote to variable, and then the name that it creates here is fine as character. Then off of the event blueprint animation, we can basically remove try get pawn owner. We're then going to drag in our get character. We're going to right click, validate it. There we go. So this is basically the tick for animation blueprints. So then when on begin play, which here is basically blueprint initialize animation, we get a cast to our character. Then here on tick, once our character cast is valid, then what we're going to do is drag out of here and type in get base aim rotation. Then we're going to drag out of here and type in get actor rotation. We need that one as well. Then what we want to do is that we want to type in delta rotator. Then we get this function. Then in A, we put our base, and our actor rotation goes here in B. Then if we break this, so if we right click and type in split, then this is basically our pitch. And as we saw, we set up our aim offset to have a pitch of minus 90 to 90. So this here is basically our pitch. So we're going to promote this to variable, and let's just call this pitch. And then off of the is valid, we're going to hook this up, hit compile, and save. There we go. Now we need to go into our animation graph, and then what we see here, since this is the skeletal mesh of the bean and we made this aim offset on the skeletal mesh of the bean, it simply appears here inside of the asset browser. So now over here we can simply drag in our AO that we created, hook it up, then it asks us for a pitch. So in here goes the pitch, and it asks us for a base animation, which we're going to use the bean base for over here. Hit compile, save. So there we go. Now we have set up aim offset for our character. Now that this animation blueprint here is done, we can close it, go over to our character, select our mesh, click over here under animation blueprints on the animation class. And then here we see our NMBP for our bean. If we then select that, then we see that it's assigned. We then hit compile, save. And if we go ahead and hit play, look down, then we see that our bean now starts to bend. So he bends up and down, up and down. And then will this automatically work in multiplayer? Well, the answer is yes. So if we do 2 players here, server on the right, client here on the left, then we see that if the character looks up, we see the client looking up, client looking down. And then if the server does it, then the server can look up, server can look down. And since that gun is attached to our mesh, it will basically automatically take that actual rotation of the beam. And now some of you might wonder, how can it be that this automatically gets replicated? Well, basically to break that down, since our character is replicated, our character movement component is replicated, then that means that our data inside of our character is replicated as well. So this animation graph here basically runs off of data that it gets from the character here. And some data that it gets off the character here is the base rotation and actor rotation. Well, like I said, since that character is replicated by default, these values will also go to the local version of the client. That is the proxy character basically for the client. And then that proxy character can simply read these values that it gets. And then locally for the proxy characters, it basically interprets that data and handles its animation blueprint inside of the instance of client 1 or inside of the instance of client 2. So there we go. We can then close this, hit compile and save. Then we can now get back here to our character. So our preview here for the weapon, we basically want to clear that. So with the backslot selected, we're going to empty it out again. Hit compile, save. And then for our core weapon here, we're also going to go to its construction script, remove the setup logic here, because we don't actually want that. We don't actually want to preview it here in the scene. That is just for testing and debugging purposes. We just actually want that to occur only on begin play. Okay, so now we can go a bit further down the line. So first of all, we want this core weapon to be replicated by default. So we click here on class defaults, then we click here on replicate true. Hit compile and save. And then since this is a battle royale and we want to see everything at great distances, then just like the character, which we want to see at any distance, we do not want net culling distance to apply to it. So this one, we're also going to set it to always relevant true. Hit compile and save. And then like we just said, this is our core weapon. So what does that mean? Well, we're basically going to use this class core weapon, which we can find here inside of our actors folder. We're going to use it to be creating child blueprints so that we don't have to code basic logic that every weapon in our battle royale has over and over again. So what we're going to do in our core weapon is we're going to set up some variables right now that most weapons have, such as the ammo amount, the max ammo, the reload duration. You might want to do the damage, of course, a sound effect for when you shoot, etc. So we're just going to set up a couple of basic values here. So we're just going to click on the variable, click plus. Then we're going to type here ammo, which needs to be of the type float. And then we want also max ammo. Then next up, we want something like reload duration. Then it might also, yeah, like I said, it wants a shooting sound effect. And that needs to be a sound cue. So if we type in sound cue, then we find it over here, object reference. Then that's hit compile and save. And there we go. And then we're going to make our first child class here. So actually, to organize this a bit more, we're going to make a new folder. Let's call it weapons. And then our core weapon is going to go in here. And then if we right click, we're going to create our first child weapon. So click on create child blueprint class. And let's call this BP underscore assault rifle. And then if we open this guy up, then we can see here in the event graph that we can now start to code this weapon. So the first thing that we want to do is set up its default values. So those variables that we made inside of the core weapon here. So with the assault rifle selected, if you then click on class defaults, then you see all those settings over here. So here we can assign the correct item ID, which is item ID 1. So that basically sets up the static mesh for the weapon. Then we can say the amount of ammo. So let's give this one 30 bullets. Currently, and then 30 max ammo. Let's say it has a reload duration of 1 second. And then for the shooting sound effect, I'm quickly going to import some shooting sounds. Okay, so I imported a couple of sound effects. So we got assault rifle reload, assault rifle shot, pistol reload, and pistol shot. So then if we go back into our assault rifle here, then over here we can select our assault rifle shot. There we go. And then we obviously also want the reload sound. So back in our core class, we can then duplicate our shooting sound and then call this our reload sound effect. Hit compile and save. And then inside of our assault rifle, we can then assign the assault rifle reload. Compile and save. Now, in your typical game, you got way more parameters, of course. So this is just showing you guys how to do something like this. Generally, you would have something like bullet spread, you would have something like fire rate, you would have the different firing modes, whether it's single shot, burst shot, automatic. Then perhaps your gun can even jam sometimes. You'd have your impact effect. So whenever you shoot, it impacts on the floor a certain type, a specific type. So it has all types of like particles. There might come particles out of the gun. There might fall some ammo whenever you shoot. You obviously have like a gun flash, all these types of things. You must have something like gun sway. And in even more advanced games, you also have crazy parameters, of course, for how much inventory space it takes, etc., etc. But basically, the possibilities are endless here, and you can set this up however you like once you understand the concept of how to handle these types of things. So now that these default settings are kind of set up, we then want to go over how we can actually handle the input. So basically inside of our character, when we start to click left mouse button when holding a gun, then obviously we want to basically start shooting. And when we press R to reload, we want to start reloading. So if we head over here to edit, project settings, and then go to our input, then we want some new action mappings here. So the first action mapping is going to be called primary action. If we click here, then we want to click it on left mouse button. And then the next input will be reload, which we want to assign if we click here to R. Close this, there we go. Then next up, we basically want to handle the clicking. So if we go over to our character, then we want to get our input events in here. So we want to get our primary action, this one. And then we also want our reload, this one. So whenever we do the primary action, then we want to use an event dispatcher to forward that. So the way that we're going to do it is we're going to make an event dispatcher called on primary action. And we're also going to make an event dispatcher called on reload. Then we're simply going to drag these in and call them and then hook it up. Drag this one in, call it, hook it up. So we've used this before when setting up the widgets for the main menu. It's basically a dispatch that any other actor can respond to if they bind themselves to this dispatch. So how do we do something like that? Well, in our core character over here, we basically are going to need a reference of our character. And if the core character has a reference of our character, then it can bind to these events. So whenever you just click, it will simply fire this. Whenever you click, it will fire this. Then if the core weapon here is bound to the events, it can handle them however it feels fit. So for the assault rifle, the left click is going to auto fire the gun and going to fire all the bullets, right? The R is going to reload. But then if we're using something later down the line, perhaps something like a riot shield, then that would handle completely differently. So there the primary action would basically make it so that the shield would go in front of your face. So a grenade would make it so that you would throw the grenades. So every weapon here basically needs to handle that differently. We're now going to need a reference of the character. So on begin play here, we're basically going to type in get owner. And then off of the owner, we're going to cast to our BP core character, which is this guy. And then we're simply going to store a reference of our core character. So as core character is fine, hit compile and save. And then if we click that variable that we just created of our core character, which comes out of the cast here, then what we see is that we now see these dispatch events that we created. So now we can simply click on the plus here and then do the same here on the reload. And then whenever the character now starts to shoot, this basically fires. Whenever the character reloads, this basically fires. But instead of doing that here, we basically want to do that specific logic inside of the child blueprints. So we want to do that over here inside of the assault rifle. So since we know that in the core weapon we have a reference of our character here, then we also have that variable available to us inside of the child class here. So we simply right click and type in get core character. Then we see that variable popping up right here. Then with the variable popping up here, we can then basically click it and then click the events here as well. So we want to click the primary action, click it again, and then click the reload action. Then this one can go away. And here we go. So now this class can start to code itself. So for the reloading, we would need to get all of those default parameters such as ammo and the reload duration, etc. So over here, you would then type in get ammo. And then you would also type in get max ammo, and you would get your values such as get reload duration, and you also want to get your reload sound effect, etc. So when the player starts to reload, you basically want to use those values that are available to us and code off of there. And for primary, we want to use things such as actually shooting a line trace and then applying damage, playing the shooting sound effect. So here we want to get shooting sound effect. And like I said, we want to get damage. We want to get something like rate of fire, perhaps. So actually, let's set those up. So back inside of our core character, we're going to make some more variables called damage. This needs to be a float. And then another one, we're going to call it rate of fire. So our fire rate. Then in here, we also want to get our damage. And we want to get fire rate. And there we go, hit compile and save. So now before we go any further, I basically want to test this logic and see where we are at so far. So back inside of the character, with the active weapon here selected, we're going to swap out the BP core weapon here with our newly made assault rifle. There we go. Then I want to go into my assault rifle and basically just print string. So we're going to print string, and let's say that we print string our damage. So we haven't set up the damage yet, so inside of class defaults, let's set the damage for the assault rifle to something like 20. And the rate of fire, let's set that to, I don't know yet, because we're going to figure this out, but something like, let's do 0.2, for example. Compile, save. And then for the reloading, here we're just going to print, let's say, our reload duration. So, and then we're going to hit play, and then let's see what happens here. So now if I left click or press R, nothing happens. So basically where this goes wrong, if we take a look here inside of the core character, then we see that we type in get owner and then we cast to our core character. So most likely this cast simply fails. So we do print string. Let's see if it says hello. So hello, yeah. So hello, 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 hello. So it says it 4 times. So that's great. So basically, yeah, we cannot cast like this. So basically what we want to do instead is that we actually want to set this reference ourselves from the character. So right now, since we're just, since we by default have an assault rifle right now, I'm going to do it off begin play, but this would typically happen whenever you switch the weapon. So what we're going to do is that we're basically going to drag off of here. Then we're going to type in get, let's see, child actor. Then off of the child actor, we want to cast to our core weapon. And then before doing anything here, we basically want to set the owner here. So we want to set the owner to ourself. And then once we set the owner, we then want to set that reference. So set core character reference. There we go. That reference also needs to be set to ourselves. And this is basically the setup function for when we get new weapons. So when I get an assault rifle, I want to set myself up as the owner, and I want to set this variable of the core character as the reference so that I can use these events that come from that character. So back here, we're going to right click this and then call it setup, let's say weapon. And then the setup weapon right now needs to go off of the begin play here, just for debugging purposes. So what I'm going to do, move this to the side a little bit, hold S, left click to get a sequence. And then I'm going to hook it up just like this. There we go. And then one more thing also, that since we now set it up like this, so we basically give ownership, we basically give the character ownership of whatever weapon we have. We then set up that weapon with the reference of the character. So since we do it that way, we basically don't want to use these events that come off of when we type in here, get core character. So off of this variable, we got these events. That's not going to work. So what we're going to do is remove these. And then instead, what we're going to do is inside of our core character here, we're going to drag in our variable. And then we're going to type in bind to, and then we're going to type in the names of those dispatchers. So we're going to type bind to primary action, and then we get this one. And then we're going to do the same for the reload. So we're going to type in bind to reload. There we go. And then we see that we get events here. So off of this event, we're going to drag new event and just call this primary action. Here we go. And then this one here, we're going to call this one reloading. And actually, let's not call it reloading. Let's call it reload. That's a better name. Now these events, we can just put them under here because I'll show you in a little bit, but we're going to bind to them. And actually I want to disconnect this and hook it up nicely like this. So we're going to use these events inside of our child class. But before we do that, we now see that we execute this logic on begin play. And we see that over here, we execute the logic also on begin play. Well, typically this is just for debugging, right? But typically this would just happen whenever you set the weapon up. And at that point, everything would be fine. But now since we're running this on begin play, which sets the reference, and then this one also fires on begin play, and the weapon is already attached here, then this begin play inside of our core character is not going to fire in time. So what we want to do instead is that we want to remove the begin play, and then that begin play, we want to replace that with a custom event, and we're going to call this setup actor. And there we go. And then hook this up just like that. Hit compile and save, and then back inside of our core character, inside of this setup weapon function, then here we basically want to also type in setup actor. So once we set the reference and everything, then we want to set up the actor. Then we hit compile and save, and there we go. So basically the character right now on begin play, because we have a weapon set up here already, fires setup weapon, gives ownership, sets the reference, then calls the setup actor event then does the bindings. And then what we need to do right now is that we need to make some custom events here. So custom event, and we call this one handle underscore primary action. There we go. And then for the reload, we call another custom event. We call it handle underscore reload. And these events are going to be used inside of the child blueprints. So off of the primary action here, we want to do the handle primary action event. So you can put it somewhere, something like that. And off of the reload, you can do the handle reload. And there we go. So this doesn't look nice, but you can obviously just collapse this, collapse the nodes, for example. So let's hit compile, save, and then inside of here, we're going to type in handle. So let's see, primary action, and then we want the event. And then we also want to do handle reload, and then the event. Then we're going to hook this up. There we go. Now we hit play. And then start left clicking. Then we finally see that the event is coming true. Press R, we see that the reload comes through. And also on the server, we can also left click and press R. So now we basically got the correct way to set that all up. Check out Cactus Center right now on Steam and Early Access. It's a very fun multiplayer video game, cheaper than the Starbucks coffee. So if you want to have a good time with your friends or strangers, click that link down below. And I appreciate every single one of you. And enjoy the rest of the video. Bye! So instead of putting these variables in here, we're going to disconnect them. And then I'm just going to make this say shoot. And I'm going to make the reload just say reload for now. So this is fine for now. And then in the next video, we will actually be setting up the assault rifle so that we can be shooting. But now for this video, we basically need to also make sure that we can actually, because that's what this video is all about, walk up to a loot crate and then open the loot crate. Right, so we're going to open the loot crate and then press E, and at that point we want that gun to attach. So we do not want it to be attached by default as right now. We obviously just want to pick them up. So what we're going to focus on right now is we're going to close the assault rifle. We're also going to close the core weapon here, and then we're going to close this function. And then actually we're going to remove all of this because this was just for debugging purposes. So we're going to close this like that. Then the active weapon here, we're going to reset it. So it actually needs to be completely set to none. And then we can now code the functionality that we can start to pick up these actors. So we're going to take a look at this actor now. So if we open this guy up, then we see that from the previous video, we have this event interact here. So off of here, if we basically press E, this will basically start to fire off. So if we do print string here and then type in something like, let's actually print string the name of this actor. So there we go. Then we see that if we start to interact with it, we see assault rifle printing and pistol printing. So that's the event that we want to handle. But what we want to actually do is that we basically want this guy to communicate with our core character what the ID is of the weapon that we picked up. So then the first thing that we're going to have to do is adjust this event interact to also pass through the reference of who is actually interacting with us. So if we go here to our interfaces, interaction, then here we see interact. And then what we want to do, if we open this up, is that we want to add an input and that needs to be of the type, let's say actor. So we want to pass an actor reference, and this one is the interacting actor. And then also what we want to pass through is that ID. So we also want to basically click here and then do the string. And then we want to pass through the item ID. So that is the ID of whatever item we are interacting with. So then with that adjusted, if we then go back to our core character and take a look at that event that we have over here, then we see that, well, here, first of all, on the server, we now have the pin for the interacting actor. So there we want to send a reference of ourselves. So we are the actor that's interacting. And then if we hit compile save, then now inside of the pickup item now knows that it is us who is interacting. And now we want this guy to interact back to that character here. And then basically fire an event here to switch the weapons or to handle the tool being taken. So what we can do, we can either just make a custom event and cast here. Well, we know that pickup items are only interacting with our core character always, or we can just run this over interfaces, which is a bit cleaner. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to make a specific new interface here. So if we right click inside of our interface folder, and then go to blueprints, then we're going to click here on blueprint interface. And then we want to call this something like, let's say BPI tools. So basically any weapon or anything that you can equip in a game, we can just generally call that tools, I guess. So then inside of here, we want to then type in handle, handle pick up. So we want to handle something that we pick up or that we interact with in this case. And then what we want to send through here is simply the ID of whatever actor we interact with. So we type in ID. And there we go. So now inside of our character, if we then click on class settings and then here under interfaces, we can then type in BPI tools. And then under interaction here, we see handle pickup. So if we double click that, we now have an event so that we can handle a pickup. Then inside of our pickup item here, we then want to basically say that we want to call that event. So we're going to type in handle pickup. And then it is the message. So this one, we hook it up. The target is the interacting actor. And the ID here is the ID of this item. So it is this one that goes in here. So the pickup item has an ID, communicates it through, and there we go. Now actually, we do not need the ID over here under the interact. So we can actually open that one up again and then remove the ID here because that's not what we need. We just need an ID in this one. So here we go. And then off of this ID, we can now basically handle the whole pickup logic. So what can we do then? We can then type in get data table row, this one. And then the data table is our pickup items. And then the ID would go in here. So then we know over here what type of item we are talking about. And now we do see that we previously just defined an ID, a name, a static mesh, and a spawn percentage. But what we need as well right now is that we basically define what the blueprint is that we pick up. So if we head over to our data folder and then the pickup structure, then we want to add another variable and call this the blueprint. So this is the blueprint that this pickup item basically gives to us. So over here, we're then simply going to type in actor. And then actor, instead of actor object reference, we then want to have an actor class reference. And then if we hit save, then we can go back inside of our pickup data table here. So for the assault rifle, it is the blueprint of the assault rifle. There we go. And now for the pistol, we would need to set that up in the near future and the health pack as well. But for the assault rifle, it's the assault rifle blueprint. And then back inside of our character. So then we see the blueprint class that comes out of here whenever we do this. So now what we need to do is that we then basically get our active weapon. And then we can simply type in set child actor class. So this one. And then after setting our child actor, we want to call that setup weapon function that we made earlier. So this one actually then, so if we swap out the child actor here, then this function that we made basically sets us to be the owner, the character reference, and then calls the setup function on the weapon itself. So if we then hit play, then we can walk up to a loot crate and then let's find ourselves an assault rifle. So here we go, and I press E, and there we have it. So now we got an assault rifle in our hand. So now that we got this base logic, then we can continue off of this. So first of all, we need to replicate it properly, but we also want to test it for the pistol. So we're going to go over here to our weapons folder. We're going to duplicate the assault rifle and not make another child class there. And this one we simply call pistol. And then inside of the pistol, we're going to change some variables here. So for example, the ammo, let's set it to 15. The damage, let's set it to 15 as well. And the firing rate, let's set that to 0.5. And then the shooting sound effect, we can do the pistol shot, and the reload is the pistol reload. And then the item ID is 2. So this one has to set up with the item ID 2, which is the pistol. So there we go. Now if we go over to our data table again, so we now have a lot of different parts working in our project, but that's just the complexity that it gets to at some point, and that's unavoidable. So now we go here, we assign the pistol, then hit play. Then we can have a quick look here. So we can equip an assault rifle, and then then we get a pistol, and then we can equip a pistol. So now we see that a lot of things need to happen. First of all, when we picked up the assault rifle here, then if we pick up the pistol next, then we want that pistol to go to our backslot basically. But also if we pick up items, we want them to delete themselves inside of the world. So a couple things right now. So first of all, in the pickup item here, on event interact, after that we want to destroy. So here we go. And we can simply call destroy like that, because keep in mind the event interact occurs on the server. So here inside of the character, we see that the server calls that. And since it is replicated, then calling it destroy here will also destroy it on the client. So that's one part. But then also we basically want to set up the logic so that on the client everything works fine. So right now this comes through on the server, and the server sets this up. So if we were to test this with 2 players, put one here and one here, then we see that if the client does it, so the client picks up a pistol, that nothing happens. But if the server does it, so if the server now picks up a pistol, then it does work, but the client doesn't see the server pick up the pistol. But the server does see that the client picked up a pistol. So we now need to properly replicate this logic over here. So to replicate that properly, we're simply going to make a little variable here, and we're going to call it active, or let's call it current weapon. So we can't call it active weapon because this one's already called that. And then we want this to be of the type string. And then this is basically going to capture our ID. So we're going to set this to rep notify. Now keep in mind, rep notify, if you change the value, it happens on the server and clients, but the server has to call it. So here we have the server, then the server is basically going to call. So if we move all this code over here, the server is going to call this rep notify and basically change its value like this. And then all of this logic, we're going to copy it, double click the rep notify. We're going to get the variable in here, and then we're going to put all of this logic in here. So both for the server and the client, we're going to basically pull all of this data, set the child actor, call the setup logic here, and then basically go from there. So now if we hit play, then we see we have the client here on the left and the server on the right window. So let's open all the loot boxes. There we go. So now if I pick up an assault rifle, then we see that both the client and the server see that I have an assault rifle. But then if I pick up a pistol, it swaps out the assault rifle with the pistol immediately. That is not the logic that we want, of course. So what we would want in that case is that since we had the assault rifle first, we would want the pistol in that case to then go to the back. So the pistol needs to be on the back of the beam. And then we want the player to somehow, for instance, by scrolling or by pressing the numbers 1 and 2 and 3 on their keyboard, then we want the players to basically be able to switch between the active, or we can also call it the selected weapon. So that's what we're going to be working on in the next video. This is it for this episode. I hope you guys liked this episode and enjoyed it and understood everything. It is getting more and more complicated now. So if you guys have any questions, please leave them down in the comments below. If you want to mess around with this project yourself, it is of course available on my Patreon for download. I appreciate you guys for watching and see you guys in the next episode. Bye!